Okay, good morning. I'll call the Truckee River Flood Management Authority meeting Friday, October the 11th to order with a roll call, please.
Ron Smith.
Here.
Ron Hartung.
Here.
Don Abbott.
Here.
Naomi Doer.
Here.
Hillary Sheevy is not present. And Jeannie Herman, not present. You have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum. If you'll all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Abbott, would you lead us?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman, before we get started, may I introduce someone?
Sure, absolutely.
This is Adriel Valdespin. He is he's the son of one of my coworkers upstairs, and I asked him to join me today, and this is the future of our county.
Yeah. How come you're not in school?
Because I have fall break.
Okay.
On fall break, yes. Yes.
Yeah. But we were going to have to arrest you.
And furthermore, good answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll open up the public comment. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the authority. Approval of the agenda. And let me point out right now, we need to pull items 2 and 6. So looking for a motion.
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Who was the second there?
Mr. Hartung.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, approval of the draft minutes of August 9th, 2019 Board of Directors meeting. Any changes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, announcements and clippings. George.
Yeah, we have quite a few clippings this time. We have, of course, a couple about Daybreak and the UNR Farms purchase, and there are a lot of interesting stories in here. If you guys have any comments, I'd like to hear it. Or, anyways, and one big announcement: we had Lori Williams retire after several years. She'd been here the whole time the authority was set up. And we are now have our second financial officer, and that is Deborah Crowley. Deborah, why don't you stand up?
Hi, Deborah. Welcome.
Aye.
Thank you.
And Deborah will be coming in to give the financial reports here later on in the meeting.
Okay. Mr. Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manager, would you briefly touch on the UNR Farms purchase?
Yes, the UNR Farms purchase, we actually had a meeting, a community group meeting, and the UNR, one of the UNR Farms, or not UNR representatives was there, and we did discuss this some. There is considerable detail in the Board of Regents meetings. I have not reviewed all of that yet, but it's 104 acres. It is along the McCarran Strip. It is in our floodplain area. It's in our right in the middle of our floodplain issues. It's unlike Daybreak that's kind of out on the fringe. This is right there. So it's something that, you know, we'll have our radar on because it can have impacts depending on how it's built on our actual project.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, may I just ask
Sure.
a fast question without getting into any deliberation? How might this potentially affect our project? I mean, I thought that was, all of that area was, historically floodplain and used sort of for overflow and detention.
That's exactly right.
I would just like to note, we aren't agendized to really
No, I
discuss that
understand.
issue, and I know you're aware of that, but
This is a question to the manager. I mean, I don't believe any other commissioners are deliberating. Does that make a difference?
deliberating is defined much more broadly than that.
Okay.
Receiving information as a group is considered deliberating.
Okay, but it was part of the floodplain.
Yes.
Okay, Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Are you done with that, George?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to number 3, presentation discussion of the status of the Army Corps of Engineers review of TURFMA's locally preferred plan.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This particular, we've had a lot of activity with the Corps over the last 4 months, and I thought it was time that we catch everybody up and make sure everybody's up to speed on what's going on with the Army Corps of Engineers. There's a lot of history in this staff report. I don't want to really get into all that, but it kind of shows the history of our relationship with the Corps, especially since the first authorization back in 1988. The pertinent thing that we were dealing with is in 2014, with the passage of the WRDA bill, this project was reauthorized, and we had an accepted NED 50-year plan, and we also proposed a locally preferred plan. The locally preferred plan was to be reviewed to see if it met 4 criteria. Those criteria included being having a cost-benefit ratio greater than 1, being feasible for construction, being environmentally acceptable, and those were the main ones, actually. So when you look at those, they went through a process. We had a contract with them that we opened up last year, and they went through the process of reviewing it. And in that process, they have concluded that because of downstream impacts from Vista Narrows, that it does not meet the environmentally acceptable criteria. We have been doing considerable work on Vista Narrows to know exactly what that impact is, and we will have some information for you in some very near future meetings. We're still working on going back and forth on comments and stuff, and so we're not really ready to give that today. However, we can tell you that there is about a 2,400 CFS increase during the 100-year peak flow. During lesser flows, there is actually no impact whatsoever. That is similar to the NED plan, which was accepted, of 1,500 CFS, with little or no impact as the flows went down. So they basically rejected our plan. I don't agree with the decision. I'll just be honest, and I'm going to be that way as a director. I'm going to try to be very honest with you, even in public. You know, I don't agree with the decision. However, in light of that decision, really the only course of action that I saw going forward was to suspend the activity. And because the additional thing that we were working on, which is the PED plan, which is the common features plan, we also went to suspend that because it's a common feature on the LPP that was being rejected by them in the 1036 review. So we went to go to suspend both on those grounds. I was very clear with the Corps that the NED plan, as they had formulated it, would not work because it has induced floodings on South Reno, and we need Vista Narrows to lower the water level so that we do not have any impacts on South Reno residences and businesses. And so because that plan doesn't work, and they think our plan doesn't work, there's really no place to go except for to build Vista Narrows, show them that we can deal with the tribes and other downstream stakeholders, get this thing built, then they have nothing to object to. And so that's the course of action that we decide to take with them. And we have been on course to build Vista Narrows in our 5-year plan. We also have a presentation about a 65% project. So at this point, our strategy is to suspend both of those. That will save us roughly $3 million over the next 3 years, and we can pick those up later. It does not change our relationship with the Corps fundamentally. We're still authorized, et cetera. But for now, until we can get this reformulated with Vista Narrows taken care of, it's really, it really has nowhere else to go.
Are you planning in the future here to give us a report on the Narrows?
In like the next agenda item, okay. And then we also will have follow-up reports that will give more detail on downstream impacts in future months.
Okay. Questions, comments, Ms. Dewar?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to make sure I heard you correctly, because that was a lot of stuff in there. So you're saying that in this 1036 review, which is a kind of an interim review, the Corps said that they can't, I'll use the word bless, but agree to or condone building Vista Narrows because of this increased flow, which you said is almost the same. I guess it's about 50% more from 1,500 to 2,400. Is that what you're
Right,
saying?
right.
And then we did, the community through the flood project did a lot of restoration, put the curves in the river. Is that not considered mitigation for these increased flows?
They did not consider that in their analysis, which is something else I disagree with.
Well, when you say they didn't consider it, did they say it doesn't work, or it's not good enough, or they just acted as if it doesn't exist?
That was door number D, the last one.
They act as if it hasn't been done.
Yeah.
But we did it, we put the curves in, that slows down the water. We put the vegetation in, that slows down the water.
Right.
In terms of these CFS, it may cause.
It does
pooling.
have some impacts. We actually are figuring out exactly how much it is and trying to get numbers for that in our 65%, which will be the next presentation. But in future months, we'll be able to tell you the exact impacts and also how these projects are impacting it as well.
What projects?
The previous restoration projects, but I'm talking about positive impacts, not negative
I got you.
impacts.
And then if I may, one follow-up on that. So the restoration, I guess I was wondering, have you heard from the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe that they have concerns about these flows? I mean, who is raising this concern? Is anybody besides
The Corps told us that they had been talking to the tribe, and the tribe was very concerned about having higher flows given to them, and it is. If you're doing some sort of impact to somebody, you ought to be able to mitigate it.
Right.
And the NED plan had no mitigation either. Our initial LPP had no mitigation, and we fully plan to engage with the tribe once we have our results firm and talk to them about what would be an equitable solution. We need to be good stewards and good neighbors.
When you say results, though, do you mean results of some kind of hydraulic analysis of the impacts? Is that what you're saying, results?
Hydraulic analysis, sediment analysis, yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we're looking for a motion that would, to endorse the decision to suspend the work on the water bill.
Yeah.
If I may?
Yes.
I guess I have one follow-up question. I guess I didn't understand.
Are you making a motion right now?
No,
'Cause
I'm not.
We'll have further discussion.
Oh, fine.
Okay. Looking for a motion?
I guess I have a question. Is this,
Wait, why don't we get through the motion, then we'll have further discussion.
I can't make a motion until I understand more, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
And then,
I-
then in that case, Ms. Dewar, go ahead and go first.
Oh, okay. I guess I was just wondering, I was a little bit confused when I heard that potential motion, when you were talking about WRDA. So I want to just make sure I understand. You want to continue with building the Vista Narrows?
Yes.
So that's not suspended?
Yes.
And then, but you did say you wanted to suspend something else,
The
two
common
things.
features.
Right, I was unclear on that, I guess.
Okay, so we, in our 5-year plan and in our current budget, we are currently working with the Corps and a consultant, Atkins, on a plan to do a common features project up by where our property is.
And this is one of the elements? Is that why you're saying suspend that?
Yeah, because it is common to both the NED and the LPP. We don't believe the NED is viable. They don't believe the LPP is viable, so why are we doing a common features project?
I got you. So when you say suspend work on WRDA, what you mean is like lobbying work or like meeting with the Corps, or what does that mean?
It means we currently gave the Corps over $600,000 for the 1036 review, and we gave the Corps roughly little over $600,000 so far for a design of the common features. What we would do is put our pencils down, get the remaining money back, and then save the future payments. We are on the hook for roughly 2.2 million total for the design of the common features, and they wanted to accelerate our payment and have us pay for both sides of the 1036 review. So that's what kind of initiated a lot of this discussion in the first place back in June with the Corps. And that would have, you know, the total cost of that was 2.8 million. So that could have put us on the hook for 2.8 million, so 2.2 million more than what we are already paying. So that's what I'm talking about, is not paying that money and getting some of that money we've already given back and putting our pencils down on the 1036 review, which they've come to an initial finding, an initial draft finding of no, we don't approve. And also on the common features, which is a 100% design, and we've got a lot of the base data, so we'll keep that data for future reference, but we don't want to go further with it right now with both plans not being acceptable to each side.
So you would just keep talking to, like, trying to get concurrence with the downstream people, whoever they are?
Yes.
On focus there? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Hartung?
Nope, he's answered my question about what we've paid the
Yeah.
Corps and, okay.
Okay, any further discussion? Looking for a motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to number 4, presentation discussion of the status of the agreement for professional engineering services with Atkins North America Incorporated.
Okay, so this is the Vista Narrows design. There in your books, there is copies of these slides if you want to see them. And of course, you're welcome to anything that we have on this if you want any further information. In your book, you also have the kind of the core of the 65% design. It's about 48 pages long. And then, of course, I did summarize it in a couple of different ways for you, so you didn't have to thug through that whole thing. So to begin with, Vista Narrows is in our capital budget. We have already, put in our budget to do a 65% design. And so today I want to tell you that the 65% design draft has come in. It is a very good design. It looks like a 65% design in my experience of being an engineer, because I've done a lot of these kind of things that are very similar to this kind of work, and it very much looks like a 65% design. We do have some follow-up and some back and forth on some of the downstream hydraulic effects are not quite done yet. But as far as the design is looking really good. So if you could hit the next slide, please. Or do I do that? Okay. So everybody should know the location of this, especially the Sparks delegation. So let's just go to the next slide, but it's down on the very far east side. And here's another picture of it. You can see Tum Wharf on the left side of the photo. And this is on the right side, you can see the Sparks industrial area. And also on the lower left side, you can see a lot of bare land. Some of that land, especially down at the bottom there, is the beginning of the terracing. And on the right side of the river there would be where some of the lower levees would go in and be upgraded to become the protection for the lower industrial area. The idea of the entire project would be to dry up the entire industrial area during at least a 100-year flood. And I will say this, I want to be honest and transparent. When you put in the way we're levying and our factors of safety and everything else, this turns into a 150-year design. And that's really what it should be. I've done some review of the frequency analysis. There's a lot of uncertainty in that. You really, even though it says the 50 is this and the 100 is that, there's a lot of uncertainty around those numbers, so you really should have a conservative design. Next slide. So the history of the Vista Narrows, the Vista Reefs were excavated in the early 1960s. The channel manipulation caused the channel to downgrade and in size, but did not materially impact the degree of backwatering from the spot. The reason why is it was still constricted during high flows. The Vista Narrows has always been known as a pinch point and a key to the Meadows Reach flooding in all evaluation documents dating back to the 1970s. I got to review all of these documents when I went through our records and we were trying to organize things for our move. So I've reviewed all that stuff, and it's amazing how things change and not change over 50 years. Next slide, please. The Vista Narrows current activity, as I talked about, the Narrows has been a part of the Flood Authority's plans and the predecessors to the Flood Authorities all the way back into the 1980s. It could be said it's the cornerstone project, and I would say that because without it, you can't do the rest of the project because you induce flooding in South Reno. It's part of the local plan, preferred plan of 2013 and 14. And I believe it's 2017, but it might be early 2018, decided to take the design to the 30% level. That was done. In 2018, we took it to the 65%. We just got the draft in on August 30th when we were having Jay's party for retirement. And we recently received the design documentation report, as I just said. Next slide. So what makes it so vital? And this is really important, and this is something I want to really stress, even though most of you on the board already know this, but for people in the audience, et cetera, the Vista Narrows terracing balances the floodwater storage taken away when the Sparks Industrial Area and Airport and other high-value features such as the Reno Airport, as shown in the picture on the right, are no longer flood storage areas. That includes Reno Industrial Park areas as well, the airport and the Sparks Industrial Area. With Vista, the net change in water surface elevation in the Meadows Reach is no rise, and we just did a whole bunch of analysis on that, and that's what we're finding. And in fact, it's a slight lowering of flows, except right along the river in between the levees, kind of on the west side of the project. It does rise a little bit, but other than that, it's a no rise everywhere. And it's not a consequential that it rises between levees that are protecting it. Next slide. So what makes the Vista Narrows challenging? And so I kind of took this from the report that Atkins did. They did bring up some of these issues as they were going along and in their summary as well. There are a lot of easements that are needed to work with the numerous landowners for levee, flood wall, and terracing features, especially the levee and flood wall. The complexity of the levees and flood walls on alluvial deposits can sometimes be difficult because sometimes you can't get good clearance on seepage and keeping the water out. We are also terracing in an area with a known landslide. The amount of sediment generated and finding an economical way to dispose of it. So there's a lot of sediment coming out with the terracing. We need to find a place for it and not spend an arm and a leg getting rid of it. Mitigating downstream impacts, as the project will increase peak flows coming out of the valley. That is another big concern, and probably the biggest concern coming away from this. This is something that we really will have to do in permitting, is to get common ground with our downstream stakeholders. Next slide, please. So here's a picture of what it looks like in terms of land ownership. The blue is, all blue, but it's multiple landowners. And so you're working with multiple people, one of which is in the audience right now, very high input person that's really been really good in helping us out with things, Dick Mills. But a bunch of these people have different issues and things that they want as we try to get this thing built. And of course, on the right side of the bank, which is to the south in the lower part of the photo, there are different land ownerships too that we are working with. And you can see, I got a better slide for that. Next slide, please. So here's the real features here. You can see there are basically 3 terracing areas, one on the south bank, right there at that corner. That's really, I think, the thing that opens it up the most. Then down below, there's 2 terracing areas, one on the right bank and one on the left bank, that also are important in opening it up. One thing that we did do is we did not open it up more than we had to get the balancing of flows, because we wanted to balance the downstream impacts with making sure we get a no rise. So we could, if we really lost, got all the water out of there it's possible we could have had a bigger impact on lowering the flows. But to go further than no rise, we felt like that would be something that would be frowned on by our downstream stakeholders. Next slide, please. This is just a very busy slide to show you what these design drawings look like. There's, I believe, 116 of these, right, guys? I got it right. Okay. And they're very detailed drawings, what you'd expect to see in a 65% drawing. That's about all I wanted to make a point on here, not try to go into this slide and destroy your eyes. Next slide. Okay, this is a little more detail, and it kind of blows into one. And you can see the level of detail here. This is enough detail to construct off of. We just need the specs and a little more detailing of the, what kind of materials, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. This is what's called a detail drawing, and this kind of shows how, if you look at the existing ground and you look at the new ground, yeah, the good pointer there, that's the existing ground, and then you can look right to the right there. You can see the level is higher with these features and more protective, and in some cases it's quite a bit higher, and that's why the level of protection goes up. Also, the stability of these things will be designed to Army Corps standards to be an acceptable levee. So this makes this a much stronger, better design in that way. Next slide, please. This shows you a typical bank stabilization. I want to note that the vegetation treatments are still in flux. I don't think we're going to do it quite that way, but the idea is that that this project, like right now, has vertical banks. These banks are like 15 feet tall, and there will be willow plantings, there will be cottonwood plantings, there will be other plant introductions, there will be natural regeneration, etc. But what the idea is this will be done in an environmentally sensitive way. And in fact, out of the entire NED plan or the entire LPP plan, the most significant environmentally thing we're doing is the Vista Narrows project, because we are reconnecting the floodplain with the river in an area where it had incised. So we're actually recovering habitat for both wildlife and fish. Next slide, please. And this is kind of getting at the other side of the river where you're doing some heavy terracing. You can see the old bank there in red, the red arrow, and you can see right there where the pointer is. There's considerable soil being taken off there, and this is bringing that down to the level so when the floods occur, it spreads out. It's slower in the main stem. Our 65% results are showing that. And it's also can create areas where there would be some sediment deposition in those lower areas to kind of mitigate, heavy sediment transport from just natural causes upstream. The whole area will, as you can see in the above one on the right side, cottonwoods. It will not just be a flat surface. It will be ups and downs in there, and areas for retention, storage of water to recharge the groundwater and kind of reestablish a hyperrheic zone that's healthy, which can lead to better habitat for fish and other aquatic organisms. Next slide, please. This is just another slide of this. I like how it shows in the middle there along that profile just how wide this thing is in a real look, and this is without exaggeration. And you can see how it just really cuts back this and allows water to build on that and not get pinched there. Next slide, please. We will also be having a lot of information about impacts downstream, but I'd also want to talk about the impacts it has in the meadows itself. This is a depiction of the 2D model. Apologies to HDR if this wasn't the coolest one to do, but it's one I was just doing when I had the model open looking at stuff. And it just shows you how detailed this model is. There's all those little grid marks are individual grids in the mesh. And then there are all those little light green features you see along the river are cross sections. So there's literally hundreds of cross sections, hundreds of mesh points. And this model takes, on my computer, would take days to run. Maybe on HDR's computer, it might take a day or something. So very complicated model. We're trying to get this right. There's both a 2D model and a hybrid 1D, 2D model involved here in doing this work. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like in terms of design effects of the Vista Narrows in terms of the whole project build out. And the areas in purple and light purple are actual water lowering. So you can see how the water is much lower throughout that whole South Reno area with Vista Narrows involved with a whole project build out. You can also see there is a rise right where that pointer is moving around right along the river, but that is between levees and floodwalls. So this is creating basically for what's important, a no net rise for residences, et cetera, out there in the South Reno area, and actually a slight lowering. Next slide, please. And these are some particular areas, and like I said, you have the slides, and you see that it's about 2 to 3 inches in most places, and in some places it's more because this is a total build out of the whole project effect. Next slide, please. The downstream effects, the design effects downstream, this is just a chart of all the different places. It shows many of the places, McCarran, Lockwood, those are actually some of the restoration sites we worked with the Conservancy with. And this is the area that we're looking at. The Rainbow Bend is a very important place for downstream impacts, as well as the area around Wadsworth. Next slide, please. This is what the hydrograph looks like for the 10-year flow. So this is a significant flow, but it's not the 100-year flow. You can see that they're virtually the same. There is no real impact because of the whole project, including Vista Narrows, on what happens. Now, when we go to the 100-year, next slide, you can see that there is a slight increase. That's about a 10% increase in flood. It's about 2,400 CFS. And that, is something that we have to work with our downstream partners about. Basic results, we don't have our final results in, but our basic preliminary results are showing that it changes the velocities in the river about 0.2 feet per second during a flood. And during a flood, it's usually rain from 6 to 12 feet per second. So out of 6 to 12 feet per second, it's 0.2 feet per second. And it usually raises the water anywhere from 0.7 feet down all the way down to 0.3 feet down by Wadsworth. So that's the level of impact. It's not a big impact, and that is for about 12 hours total, by the way. Next slide, please. So these are all the numbers. You can look at that slide, but basically what it's showing is up until the 50-year, there's really no impact, or little to no impact, and then a minor impact at the 50-year, and then, of course, the 2,400 CFS increase at the 100-year. Next slide. Kind of shifting gears into the project cost. The total project cost is $61 million. That's the estimate right now. And there are some places where we may be able to save money, and there are some areas of vulnerability where the costs could go up. And we'll get more into that as we get more into this project, into the design. But basically, we could save some money. And the other thing, that is for the total project, including the levee and the flood wall and the terracing. So one of the things to look at there is the grading cost and the haul away and disposal costs. That right there is almost 35 million. And together, those two put together is 60% of the cost. There are significant ways of reducing those costs as we can figure out ways to handle that dirt in a cost-efficient manner. So that's kind of one of our focus points of trying to figure out ways to do that in a more efficient and inexpensive manner. Next slide, please. These are the different parts of the project. The levees and the flood walls are about 14 million. You can see the different terracing parts. They add up to about, I believe it was about 32, 33 million. And the total of all that is about 46.7. The rest of that is like basically costs for design and construction oversight, et cetera. Next slide, please. The cash flow of the project is interesting. I'm very grateful to Jay for saving some money here over the last several years. You can see the investment fund is in the middle there with the double line on it. You can see that it's gone up every year, or well, not every year, but it was at 13 million in 2014, went up to 14, then down to 11 when a lot of the work was being done on the fee analysis and some of the follow-up of the 2014 LPP. Then it went back up to 17, then 22, now it's 25. We're estimating that in the future, especially if with the core being suspended, we can add at least $5 million each year to this going forward. In 4 years, that would give us a total amount of $45 million. So we're getting close, but we're not quite there yet. We need to find some cost savings. We have a very tight budget on Vista Narrows, but this money is being set aside for Vista Narrows, and that's what we plan to use it on. Next slide, please. The schedule ahead is we're going to finalize the 65%, including downstream impacts, by end of the year. We want to go out and discuss mitigation with our downstream stakeholders in early 2020 when we have all our results lined out. We have already reached out to some of our stakeholders already, but we're not having serious discussions yet. Discuss access and easement issues with stakeholders in Project Zone the winter and spring of 2020. If we have a way forward, we embark on full design in 2020. Permitting work could be done in 2020. I'm planning on having a presentation about permitting and some of the obstacles there. And construction, if everything worked out right, which it rarely does, it could start in the fall of 2021, but I think it would be more realistic to say it'd be 2022. Next slide. So that's it for the presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
All right, questions or comments? Ms. Stewart?
Yeah, you can always count on me. I have a few questions, thank you. Let's see, so could you go back to couple of your early slides, like the second or third slide? You had a picture that showed, if you just go back to the beginning, I'll tell you when we get there. If you can just, I think it's the third slide there. Up there, the third slide. So on this slide, it shows on our left, which would be south, these sort of dirt roads or dirt disturbance. And I know that the old immigrant trail came through there. Have you been working with SHPO on that issue of? Yes. Okay, but could you just say, I mean, are they okay with it?
Danielle is the lead on our permitting, so I'll let her answer that question.
We have been working with SHPO and the other interested parties and stakeholders on that. We've got some reports that are being finalized, and we'll begin coordination once we have the 65% designs finalized. We have had a pre-app meeting with the Corps Regulatory Office as well and other stakeholders, so we've been in close coordination with them, and once we have more of a permitting package to submit to them, we'll be coordinating with them officially.
Okay, but so far in your coordination, have they expressed any concern, or they just wait and see, or how are they?
I haven't received any major concerns from them. Some of the other areas have been avoided the historic and cultural resources. And then I believe there was one small site, not Immigrant Trail related, but it was something that could be mitigated. So we're making every effort to avoid these sites and
Good.
to mitigate where we have to.
Okay, good. I had a question a few slides in. It was a very green slide. I'm not sure what number it was, but if you just go through till we get a lot of green. Keep going. There you go. So you said this is design effects, and so what does this really mean? I mean, there's no key or, I mean, what is this telling us?
That is just the model itself,
Yeah.
just to show you what the model looks like. The next slide is actually a results-based slide. You can go to the very next slide. That slide shows you the actual results at the 100-year flow of compared to the existing conditions with the model, with no project, nothing. This is what the full build-out of the project would do.
Yeah.
And you can see at the top there, I can't read it very well, but I believe it's like 0.25. It's a drop. I think it's a drop up to a foot. Is that right? I
don't know.
I can't read the slide.
Okay, but you're saying overall it shows that the water levels in the meadows would drop.
Yes.
Okay.
It does.
And then where it has like a dark purple right up there, I think that's like in the area of Wolfpack meats, but I'm not sure. I can't tell at this scale. Could you?
That's Wolfpack meats.
Okay. And so what's next? Is it university buildings or just open land?
I believe that's open land for the UNR
Okay.
farms.
I know that originally the project had like a levee in there to protect Wolfpack meats and some other buildings they had, like maybe dormitories or something. Is that still part of this? I mean, would we have to provide additional protection if we increase their flooding there?
Right now, Wolfpack meats in this plan is dry. That's
Yeah.
why it doesn't have any coloring on
But
it.
the purple, like, do we have to do anything? The dark purple?
Yeah, that is water just coming out back from downstream, and that's
Okay.
actually a big drop in the actual
So
water
that's
level.
a bigger drop than anywhere.
Yeah,
I
pretty
just didn't know
much.
how to read this map, so.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a few slides on, you said something about that you were talking about the reduction in, or the increase, I'm sorry, from Vista Narrows, and you were saying it was just very modest and, yeah, 10%, 0.2 feet. And then at one point you said I think you said, I'm not sure what the number 0.7 and 0.3 feet were referring to. Is that the height of the water or the?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the water surface elevation at the 100-year flow
Yeah.
compared to existing conditions with full project build-out
Yeah.
would be, and there's not a slide number on this because we're going to give this to you at a later date when the numbers are finalized, but I believe these numbers will hold up, is ranges from about 0.7 feet
Yeah.
of rise
Yep.
downstream to about 0.3
At
down by
Wadsworth, you said.
Wadsworth. Yes.
So the reason I flagged this is I wanted to make sure the whole board knew this detail. This seems like a very small number, right? 0.7, 0.3. But just to be honest, we were recently sued up at Swan Lake, and we've lost for the moment. Hopefully, we won't lose permanently, but we have several issues on appeal. But what they claimed was that our discharge from our plant was 0.7 feet, and that's all. Like, so it was only 10% of all the water in Swan Lake. It was only 0.7 feet, but rather than look at the 90, the 90% of the flow, what the court found with the jury was that this 0.7 feet, married up with some other stormwater runoff, was significant. So what I just wanted to say to you is, please do your due diligence and make sure that the mitigation obviously works and that this 0.7 feet, we can maybe reduce that because other people have found that to be significant in other recent cases. And so even though it sounds small, and I agree, it's small, it's still meaningful to others. So just a note of caution to the team, that's all.
Thank you for the caution, and we do, just to be very clear about this, we are calculating those impacts, and we plan to engage with our stakeholders. And one of the reasons, I don't want to, that's out of our jurisdiction, the North Valleys, but In the North Valleys, that 0.7 feet was a 0.7 foot for a year-round
Correct.
impact. And it caused new houses to be influenced that weren't influenced. And so what we're doing in our mitigation is any house that would be influenced that wasn't influenced.
I mean, already experiencing flooding
Yes,
versus.
yes. We are making sure that we do whatever we need to do to make sure
Yeah.
that that house is made whole.
Okay. And I
Like at
100%
Rainbow Bend, for instance.
Right, I agree, and I 100% agree with you that one is water sitting there, and the other is water's going by and maybe inundating for a couple days. But we also know that once, this cost-benefit analysis, once water goes on the side of a building, the first foot is the most impacts. It's like 90% of the impacts. So whether it's there for a day or a week or a month, it seems to matter in terms of insurance and just cost benefits. So I appreciate that. Thank you for the presentation. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
A lot of detail.
A lot of detail. This is a big move. Okay, looking for a motion. Okay.
I think it's just listed as possible direction to staff.
Yeah, just, we're given direction, just continue
Yeah,
on with.
This is informational in nature. As we go forward, we actually have results for you on the downstream impacts, and we're going to actually say things like, hey, we're going to go talk to this stakeholder. We'd like your support on that. That will be a specific motion. I don't think there's really anything specific to motion on here.
I just think to support the continuing on the track you're on.
Okay, all right,
Okay,
thank you.
That's your motion?
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I would also add or just look for some information coming back. When you have cash flow, you have the last two slides, cash flow and schedule ahead, where I got a little confused. You said that it was going to take 5 years to get get up to 45 million. But then you said the total cost is 61 million. And my question is just this: are we paying as we go, or are we going to bond? Because are we going to begin before we have all the money in hand? That's my confusion. When you say start in 2020, but we're not going to have the money till like 2024, even 45 million, I don't know when we get 61 million. So that's my question is, and maybe you could do some further work on this cash flow.
That's an excellent question, and what I'll tell you is, and this is something I've been really kind of staying up on, is we probably would not start construction till 2022, and that gives us a few years to build some more money. And this thing will be done in sections, so we will have a terracing contract, and we would have a flood wall contract, or a flood wall and levee together contract. So we will break it out into sections, and so the terracing would come first, and we would probably like to do the levee with the terracing for dirt disposal for no other good reason. But what we can do is we do not know what the downstream mitigation costs are yet.
I was just going to bring that up.
So we can start with the terracing and the downstream mitigation and see what's left over and see if we can get to the levee.
What you're saying is that the terracing, whatever that phase is you're talking about, could be a standalone project.
Yeah,
And
it
it
will
would work.
be. It will be.
Okay, so when you come back, perhaps you could just show us those breakouts of those phases so that I would be, as a board member, concerned to begin a project if we're going to do pay-as-you-go, if we don't have the money, just given our experiences with either minor or moderate or major recessions. And I know the flood project dollars went down from 9 million a year down to a low of 5 million a year. And that would not be enough to pay off your bonds and all that stuff that you've encumbered. So either we should wait till we have the money, or we could bond if we're confident, So those are some input I'm looking for.
Okay, yeah, and as we get deeper into this, I'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hartung.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, talk to me, you mentioned something about an issue with sediment and the disposal of that sediment. What kind of volumes are we talking about? Just general idea. Is it 1 million cubic yards? Is it 500,000 cubic yards? Is it?
I'm going to defer that one because you get an exact answer if I give it to Brian or Eric Shees.
And I'm not looking for an exact
Well, you're gonna get it.
Exact. I mean, but if you're a shovel full off now,
Okay. Well, I didn't bring my exact numbers. Brian James for the record, Atkins PM. But we're looking at roughly 400,000 cubic yards, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
It's between 400 and 500,000 cubic yards
something in the range of 500,000 cubic
export.
yards. Okay, of export.
of export, yeah.
Is
We're
it- what-
using some of it on site.
Yes.
For the levees.
Okay.
Specifically. We found a couple areas on site where we think we can spoil or move that dirt and
Okay.
keep it kind of within the project limits, but what we'd have to get rid of is about more than 400,000 cubic yards.
And what kind of material is it? I mean, is it nice loamy material that's not terribly rock filled, or is it just?
It varies a bit. There's quite a bit that's pretty good material or can be made into pretty good material, but I'm
Okay.
sure we're gonna run into our fair share of rock out there too.
Okay.
Out of the borings we did, I think only 2 showed rock deposits or bedrock. However, these borings are spread out over a wide area. You can't, pepper the area with a whole lot of borings. That gets very costly.
Yes.
So some of that will be figured out during construction, but most of it seems to be pretty decent material.
I'm going to ask you a really stupid question. Is it good for landscaping?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
At
is there
least
is there an opportunity here for us to potentially work with some, if not all? And while I recognize there's a lot of companies around town that provide that loamy material, but, I mean, if there's an opportunity that we might be able to engage in either giving it away or a sale. I mean, I think that there's a lot of landscaping companies that would be highly interested in this material because my goodness, it's been fed with nutrients by the river for Lord only knows how many years.
Yeah, the one downside is all the white top out there, but getting rid of that off the top layer and getting just below that layer to the good soil that's remaining, I think would be
Okay.
beneficial. And that is one of the focuses we recommended in our design report, is that the high cost of all this export is really where the project can see a huge benefit in cost
Right.
reduction, and there's lots of opportunity out there for that.
Right.
So after the 65%, we're recommending TURFMA and the board investigate who might want this dirt, what it can be used for, get that cost down and make it much more
I
palatable.
mean, there may be some companies in town that are not even necessarily in the landscaping business, but suppliers who would
I
be
know
very
Copper
interested.
Canyon is doing a lot of fill up there,
Yeah,
so.
there's
I
plenty
think
of
that'd be-
developers.
Yeah.
I think that there's some real opportunity here for the Flood Management Authority to cut those costs and, sometimes it's just, you haul. And they're willing to put the money into hauling it and moving it away, and that obviously just saves us a substantial amount of money.
Yes.
And we're looking into a lot of possibilities. We have a lot of speculative things right now that I don't really want to get into.
No,
but-
I understand.
But yeah, there is, that's exactly a focus of what we'll be doing.
But I'd like
Yeah.
I'd like to view some of these things as assets and not liabilities. And
Okay.
see if we can treat them as assets and not liabilities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other discussion? We do have a motion, looking for a second.
Second.
We have a motion, second, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to number 5, presentation discussion of proposed resolution number 2019-11, delegating authority to the chair of the TURFMA Board of Directors.
Yes, this is,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Wolz, General Counsel for the record. This is a housekeeping resolution to help us potentially avoid some future issues in litigation, should we find ourselves in litigation again. This comes in response to some changes to Nevada's open meeting law in the last legislative session. We're proposing this resolution to aid in the prosecution of litigation when there are time restrictions. What it does is it delegates authority to the chair to make certain litigation decisions. The Nevada Supreme Court relatively recently handed down a decision that involved the Nevada Ethics Commission. They were attempting to appeal a decision. The decision to appeal was made by the chair and the executive director, and they found that they did not have authority to authorize that appeal, and so it was dismissed, and since time had run, they lost their appeal on those grounds. The Nevada legislature reacted to that and specifically allows us to delegate authority to the chair or the executive director of the body to make any decision regarding litigation concerning any action or proceeding in which the public body is a party. I drafted this with the idea that we could have a discussion as to what the nature of the delegation of authority should look like. As written, however, the chair is given broad litigation authority, but then that authority is somewhat limited. The chair could only authorize the filing of a lawsuit if time was of the essence, and action had to be taken before there could be a meeting of the board. The chair's authority to settle a case would be limited to $25,000 unless time was of the essence. That does arise on occasion under the Nevada rules where they have what they call an offer of judgment, and that has to be responded to in 14 days. And so having some authority there expressly to handle that would be useful. If the chair is unavailable, this resolution allows the executive director to act on his behalf, again, assuming that we can't get the board together to act. And if both of them were not there, then general counsel could act. Under Nevada law, an attorney has certain litigation authority just inherently in the operation and the day-to-day activity of a lawsuit, such as motions and responses and hearings. The way this resolution is written, it preserves that right. And so, as a practical matter, I think that this would come up very rarely, if ever. And as I said, it's kind of a housekeeping measure in order to avoid problems should those narrow circumstances arise. This could be changed in several ways if the board desires. We could limit the chair's authority exclusively to certain circumstances where time is of the essence. We could limit it to the type of action he could take. And we could also, if you wish, add some reporting requirements to make sure that the board is kept abreast of that, although I think we're pretty good at reporting on those litigation items. So this is, as I said, was intended to be a starting point. We don't necessarily need to finalize this today, and I will go back and make any changes that the board would like. That's all I have.
You know, I've been on the board since 2006, and this has never come up, and I know that the CEO has that $25,000 at hire.
The CEO has $25,000 for the approval of contracts.
Contracts, okay.
And we have never had a situation where we've needed to file a lawsuit or to seek an emergency restraining order. We have not had to settle a case per se. We've approved the dismissal of the 2 lawsuits that we had. So they cost no money, and we just did it. Obviously, the board doesn't want a lawsuit hanging around, so we didn't seek approval in advance for that. So as I said, it's more of a prophylactic measure than anything. And so if it arises, then we don't have to call an emergency meeting of the board.
Okay, questions or comments, anybody?
I might as well. I'll tell you what, one thing, I like the direction. I like being prepared. But I would ask us to reflect back to our own jurisdictions. I would say that lawsuits bring out, even amongst our bodies, at least in our body, a lot of different point of views. Whether we should even file a lawsuit, if you're into a settlement, how you should move forward with a settlement, and those kind of things. They've always been able to get us together and we're a larger board, this is only a 6-person board, that's a 7-person board, to give some general direction, although we don't vote. You know, it's just sort of how is the board feeling about this, or the council commission. My concern is this particular board has unanimous voting, and any one person, I mean, in some of these cases, it might be 2 feel this way, 5 feel that way, or 3 feel this way, 4 feel that way. But on this board, just any one person can, influence outcome by saying no or saying yes, either way, right? I'm open to this in a limited fashion. If it's an emergency, you can't get us together. Like I said, we're a pretty small board, and you've always been able to get us together on a phone call or something. So I'm interested in doing it to a certain point, as long as we have limits and as long as if there's actually proven that you've tried to get us together and you couldn't get us together and a decision needs to be made, like there would be a step that you've actually contacted us, found out we couldn't get together to make that decision. We all serve on many boards, and this has come up many times where we have to make decisions, related to this. And since you pointed out, it's been very infrequent that this board has gotten involved in any litigation. So again, I'm just going to reiterate, I don't know all the words on the page. I didn't study them enough to feel comfortable to say yes or no right now, but I'm generally supportive. I just want to make sure there's some limits and that we've demonstrated that we made an attempt to get together. And that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I'm guessing she's looking for a paper trail, so we cover all the bases.
Absolutely.
If there's a decision to be made.
So with that, I will rewrite the resolution, and instead of a broader grant of authority, I will limit it exclusively to those circumstances where the board
Yeah.
can't be convened in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that efforts have to be made to convene the board.
And to document, as Mr. Chair said. And also, I was a little confused because the motion says delegate to the executive director. It doesn't say delegate to the chair and the executive director, so we might want to
must
change
have
that
been-
next time.
Yes, absolutely, thank you.
Okay.
And this item, you asked for this item.
Me, no.
No, this came from me. As with the change in law, we were monitoring the open meeting law changes, and this was a significant one this
Okay.
year, so I wanted to bring it to your attention.
Yeah, I didn't,
Sorry.
I didn't really know anything
Skip
about it.
6. Yeah. Okay. Looking for a motion.
Well, okay, I'll make a motion.
Well, if we're going to pull it, we pull it. And
Well,
I think
yeah,
we just-
I can take the instruction to redraft that and along those lines, limit that a little more.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're looking for a motion to table this.
All right, well, I would actually make a motion to direct the staff to come back with us with a refined agreement or resolution, taking into account the points that we made at the dais.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Number 7, Working Group Monthly Report. Danielle?
Yes, you have the report in your folder, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding the working group meetings.
Okay, any questions or comments for Danielle?
Only a very quick question. Earlier in the meeting, our director mentioned a community meeting, and I wasn't sure if he meant, he said he discussed the UNR and a community meeting, and I wasn't sure if he meant the working group or some other community meeting. So was it this working group?
Yes, it was the most recent working group meeting. So it was not really agendized. It was some sort of conversation with working group comments
I see.
from members. And then there was some conversation after the meeting, some informal
I got
discussion.
you. Okay.
Okay. Looking for a motion to accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to Deborah in financial items.
Actually, the first item is a little bit of housekeeping. It's Michael Wool's,
Okay.
and as he has a contract coming up. And so what I did here, it's agenda item 8A, and it's regarding an update to his contract. It's virtually exactly like his previous one, except the dates have been forwarded. What we would like to do is extend him another 3 years. That's what we're looking at.
Okay. Okay, are there any questions or comments about this?
Just, I didn't get a chance to compare. Is it at the same rate, hourly rate, or different rate, or?
It's using the same formula of working,
On
tied to
retainer?
the county. He's,
Yeah.
he's,
Oh, got
When the
it.
county get raises, he
Same
gets
salary.
raises.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I would make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Did you get that, Danielle? Yes. Okay. Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, B, monthly report on the authority's financial status and related financial activity. Deborah, welcome.
Thank you. Deborah Crowley for the record, Truckee River Flood Management Authority. I have in front of me the combining balance sheet for July and August. And the current total assets are $27,542,105,000. The liabilities and fund balance are $27,147,240 million. The change from July to August is about a $632,000 increase. And the next page is the revenue and expenditure sheets for July and August. And the year-to-date for August 31st is about an 18% revenues for the whole year based on budget, and the expenditures are about 4% based on the approved budget. Any questions?
Questions, comments? So we just need to accept that part of the report. Looking for a motion.
I'll move to accept it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, move on to C, the encumbrance report.
Yes, the encumbrance reports, again, are for July, the months of July and August of this year. And basically, the current total of encumbrances are almost 5 million. And on the August 31st encumbrance report, there's a list of contracts that will be expiring, and they will be removed off of the September report.
Okay.
Any questions?
So when you say expired, they'll be paid off and we don't have to,
They will be removed from the encumbrance. The contracts have been expired.
okay.
So,
Do you have a total or,
it's about 200,000
Okay.
is what's going to be expiring, but there's also, I think, about another 150 that will be added to the September. So the net change will be about 50,000.
okay. All right. Any questions or comments for Deborah? Seeing none, looking for a motion?
Move to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. That didn't hurt, did it?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks, Deb, and welcome. Okay, board member comments, requests of future agenda items. Mr. Abbott?
I'll go ahead.
Ms. Dewar?
Something came up earlier, Mr. Hartung was asking some questions about the sale UNR farm, and I think it would be good to get an analysis or discussion about how its development could potentially affect the flood project. I think it would help the whole community to understand that. I know there's a lot of concern out there. There was a lot of concern back in, I'm going to say it was 2012, 2013, when this land was upzoned by City of Reno. I was just an independent citizen at that time, and I did not support it. I wrote a letter not supporting it because I was concerned about the impact on the flood. Now the land has actually been sold. We don't know what the development will look like, but assuming a basic development, they've mentioned industrial professional buildings, how that might impact the flood project. I think it would be good to at least have a brief discussion to better understand it at this point. So that would be, maybe it would be under Mr. Hartung, but I know we both probably had questions about it. The other one, I was wondering, we had a really good presentation on the LPP, the locally approved plan. And what I was wondering now is and I could do this either on my own or we could have a board presentation on it. I probably don't have a very good understanding of what the Corps actually approved. And this became clear to me as we were listening to the Vista Narrows. And you guys kept talking about the NED and the LPP and what they've approved. And I don't know if we have a project, cooperative agreement with them, if they've actually even approved anything or they just approved the plan. But I would just like to better understand it, and maybe other people would too, so I don't know. But I think since that's the thing the Corps kind of holding us to, we should probably at least have a presentation on it.
Well, I think we've always known that we'd end up doing this without the Corps, although we still have guidelines that we have to follow. George, do you have any?
Yeah, we could do an in-office thing.
Yeah.
If you think it's really good for the rest of the board, maybe after that we could.
That sounds great.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, unless anybody, Mr. Abbott, I don't know.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Mr. Hartung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And back on the question of UNR, George, I'd really like to hear, because it's 104 acres, I know that there's still 700 acres. So I guess the question is what mitigations will have to occur on that 704 acres, or 700 acres rather, to offset the 104, if any?
Yeah,
Because
there
when you-
apparently is a PUD plan.
Yeah, but when you
that they have.
look at the map that you had up, that 104 acres that abuts McCarran is in the flood zone. When they take it out of the flood zone, which they can do, they might even want to use some of the sediment that we come up with. But when they do that, that water has to go somewhere. And my fear is, one, that it'll either seep over into Hidden Valley, or my bigger fear is that it will affect the industrial area in Sparks, which is
Well, you know, we do have in place the one in, one out. I mean, there's rules and everything that to follow.
Yeah.
understood.
And on that note, if you could bring that back, because the projects, the Southeast Connector and this Daybreak are both, Southeast Connector said they did 1.25, Daybreak said they will do 1.25. You know, what's the thought here? You mentioned needing a safety margin, that you were going to build this levee in Sparks to protect from the 150, not the 100. It's 50 now, to my knowledge. So that implies that you think there is a need for a safety margin. And so I guess as part of that, I've been thinking this might be a related A and B agenda item. I've been wondering if this board took the initiative to get Reno to put in the 1-to-1. And so should we be talking with Reno about putting in a higher ratio? Because when we proposed it at the flood board, we were talking, and it came out of the working group, 2 and 3-to-1, not 1-to-1. 1-to-1 was a compromise. And so, one, I'm looking for what is the impact, and two, are we still happy with this number, and would we like to advocate to get some safety margin, just like we're doing on the levee? So that would be, you know, an A and a B. You don't necessarily have to do them at the same meeting, but I'm really interested in that.
And look, and I want to be perfectly clear. I don't want to hinder the plans for this project. I just want to understand the impacts.
Well, and it wouldn't apply to this project, right? I mean, we're talking about future, go forward.
Yes.
But as part of this one too, they announced that they were looking at another 40-acre parcel on UNR farm to develop. That became clear yesterday at our regional planning meeting and other meetings we've had. So I guess when you're presenting about the 100, it would be good to know about the 40.
And I agree with Mr. Hartung. I don't think that we have standards in place now, and maybe that's why they purchased the property, because they could do that, and I don't want to change the standards in the middle of the road. Well, that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying for
Go
other
to 3-to-1.
projects, this was already done in the PUD phase back in 2013.
They still have to submit the permits and everything to build.
Yeah, but I'm just saying the basic rules were in place back then. I'm not talking about changing their rules, you know. And maybe I'll just bring this up at a future agenda item. That'd be fine. I just want to get the information on these two properties, the 100 and the 40.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, I'll open up the public. Anybody in the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the authority. And number 11, without objection, we are adjourned.